Hi, everyone, and welcome back to For the Curious and Confused, a podcast for people who want to understand different perspectives of the world through the people who inhabit it. I'm your host, Don McTaggart, and today's guest is Mayim Vega, a former NASA computer scientist turned holistic life coach, public speaker, and author. Mayim is the founder of Aruka.com, a service founded on holistic health and wellness. Her approach blends scientific reasoning, holistic health practices, and spiritual insights to create a powerful framework for personal transformation. She also holds multiple certificates, including those in nutrition, herbalism, holistic health, and neuro-linguistic programming. This blend of scientific rigor and holistic wisdom allows her to offer a unique, integrative approach to health and wellness, helping individuals unlock their potential and achieve lasting success. So, Mayim, thank you very much for being here today, and I'm excited to speak to you about some of these topics.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad you're my ghost today.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So, first question, could you just give us a bird's eye view of who is Mayim Vega and what motivates her?
I think the most important things that I would say about me are number one, that I'm a mother, and I think that really drives most everything that I do. Number two, I'm a very religious person. I'm an Orthodox Jew, and faith is also very much a guiding principle in a lot of the things that I do. And I'm a wife. My first major was computer science. Just loved logic and reason and programming really when I was a child. I think my love for computer science started in middle school. I
Mm.
took my first programming class, and I remember I was like one of the few. It was like me. Usually, it was just me and maybe one or two other women, in my computer science classes, oftentimes. And I'm 46 years old. I have 7 children. And after my first child, I decided to become a work from home mom and kind of quit my career in computer science in order because I didn't feel like it was natural. I didn't feel like it was
Mm.
natural for people, like what animal on earth has a child and then shortly after puts him in the care of strangers, right? For the
Definitely.
majority of the day. There is, in nature, we do find like communal child raising, where you raise your child in a pack or in a herd or something like that, but never where you're like isolated from your child for most of the day. And I just thought this is not natural. And if it's not natural, I just felt like, I have this like inner faith that the further away we go from nature, the more in trouble we are and the more we have to compensate. So we can't be cavemen anymore. Of course, I don't want to be a caveman anymore, but just trying to compensate for all the ancient ways that we've lost. I think that has really guided me. And then as an entrepreneur, I did app development and digital marketing for mostly high-tech companies
Mhm.
straight out of NASA. That was the easiest thing I could do as a work from home mom, basically programming for other people
Mhm. Mhm.
in more corporate environments and high-tech environments and stuff like that. And then I got really sick,
Mhm.
and I had very debilitating migraines, and I thought that I was going to die.
Mhm.
And I was taking the over-the-counter medication at first, but after a while, it got really bad, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't work anymore, and I couldn't take care of my children. So at that point, I was like, I need to do something. Had my husband rush me to the emergency room because I was just in so much pain. And the doctor and the nurses, they asked me a bunch of questions, ran a bunch of tests, and eventually, at first, they thought that I had a brain tumor, but eventually they ruled that out after a CT scan, and they said, well, good news, you don't have a brain tumor. Bad news, we have no idea what's wrong with you. Here's some strong painkillers. There's nothing we can do for you. And so that wasn't the only problem that I had with modern medicine, but that was sort of like the last straw. And I suppose I have a very extreme personality as well. And so I just decided from that day on to just take charge of my own health. And that's when I enrolled in courses. Well, not that day, but eventually I enrolled in
Mm,
courses for nutrition and herbalism and holistic health. And I was able to find my cure, the root cause, not just a band-aid cure like all the painkillers were, but the real root cause of what was happening to me. And just stepping back, I was like, how crazy it is that these doctors with their degrees and this expensive equipment and expensive hospital, they couldn't tell me what I learned with some certification programs. It wasn't even a degree program, and
mm,
I was able to learn the root cause. And I'm not saying that I learned everything in those programs. I continued to learn in different programs and certifications and courses, but now I'm training people in the medical profession. Some of my students are doctors and nurses, nurse practitioners, etc., who are learning nutrition and herbalism and things like that from me. And that just goes to show how how lacking our modern medical system really is, when it comes to true health and healing. But again, I really think that the key is going back and trusting in more natural ways and going back to our ancient roots. And even though we do, I do sort of quote unquote unnatural things such as vitamin supplementation, for example,
mm,
omega vitamin therapy.
mm,
Obviously, our ancestors didn't have vitamins, but it's because we lost our ancestral ways that we have to substitute and do things like vitamins. And I did a red light therapy session last night at my friend's house. They're holistic doctors, and that felt really good. And I had to do that because I don't get out in the sunshine
mm,
enough,
mm,
and
mm.
just little things like that. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a great introduction. Thank you. I think the first question that comes to mind from that is how do we know when we've gone too far down the way of something that's an unnatural remedy versus a natural remedy? Because you mentioned that vitamin supplements is kind of an unnatural way to get the minerals we need. But then you said doing red light treatments, which one could say that our ancestors didn't have that back in the day either. So how do we know what sort of techniques are still under the category of natural versus ones that are too modernized?
Well, I think anything modernized should compensate for for what we've lost in our more natural ways. And so there's a holistic doctor and dentist by the name of Dr. Weston A. Price. He's no longer with us, but he wrote a very popular book in the holistic health movement called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And he's not the only one, but he's one of the popular ones, and he wrote a book about his research. He traveled all around the world to study different indigenous tribes, and he found that they were in excellent health. They didn't have the same diseases that we have in our Western world. They didn't have cancer, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, all these metabolic and other issues that are the leading killers in the Western modernized world. He also found that they had perfect dental health. Their teeth were straight and free of cavities, even though they didn't brush their teeth. And their women were still giving birth and fertile at the time when our women in modern society are having menopause, and the men were still virile. They were still hunting, and they were also much more valued for their wisdom and guidance than we tend to treat our own old people today. Because as we get older in modern society, usually we have Alzheimer's and dementia and all these debilitating diseases, and they just didn't go out the same way in those native cultures. And he studied people all around the world, native tribes all around the world. And he also found that, he also found that as they started entering into modern society, adopting modern food and modern lifestyles, they started getting the same diseases that we get today as well. With the
Mhm.
processed food, they would spend all day in the sun, basically, virtually all day in the sun, in shade sometimes, of course, but grounding, fresh air, sunshine, nature. I'm free of toxins and toxicants,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they were healthier. So
Hmm.
that always stuck to my mind as, what is healthy and what is not, and what is the cause of disease. And other people, there's a missionary doctor, by the name of Albert Schweitzer, I believe. He found the same thing. So I think that's how we know.
Yeah, yeah. I
Did
feel
that
like,
connect?
oh, definitely. Yeah, I
Okay.
think there's a lot of things that I think resonate with people, particularly just like the nutrition, sleep, exercise, hydration. Those are some of the topics you just mentioned. Um, and I hope we can go into that more a little bit, but I just want to maybe go back and talk more a little about your background, kind of it coming, how we got into this. So you mentioned being into coding back in middle school. Um, so I guess could you talk about how your relationship with science, what it was like as you were growing up, and then how that contributed to getting your role at NASA?
Um, well, I don't think it was science as much as it was like just logic. I think
Mm-hmm.
logic was more what I was really into. My parents actually said that I should be a lawyer. Like you love to argue, you love to use logic and reasoning to, win debates and stuff. You should be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure why I didn't do that, but yeah, computer science was my field of choice, and I had a lot of fun in the classes. I think that's why I chose it. I loved creating things. I think I'm a very creative person, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
why maybe that's why I chose computer science, is because I got to create things instead of just argue legal issues or something like that.
Right, right. One
Um,
quick follow-up question on that. What languages were you working with, either back in middle school when you were first starting or at your time at NASA?
well, I learned the basics, which would be back in that day. I guess I don't know what the basics are today, but I learned C,
Mm-hmm.
Java, assembly language.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was actually at NASA, though, we used Unix and Perl, actually Perl,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, those are our name, our for our team. Those are the languages that we use, and then later on, when I became an entrepreneur, it was more PHP, actually, PHP
Gotcha.
JavaScript. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you mentioned that you ended up kind of leaving NASA after you became a mom, and that kind of, I think, from what I am understanding, kind of led to your transformation into this holistic space. So could you fill in a little more maybe about how you decided to leave NASA with that transformation happening?
Well, leaving NASA wasn't about becoming a holistic healer. Leaving NASA
Mm,
was about becoming a work from home mom,
mm,
so
okay.
that I could be with my children and raise them. NASA had a really great daycare. It was right outside the security gate, and so I could go and breastfeed him, my first baby, right after. But yeah, it didn't feel natural. NASA was probably one of the easiest jobs I've ever had, because in college I was like, I was a waitress and I was a telemarketer, and those are kind of more pressure. And NASA was just fun. It was great working with a team. It was great working in a research environment.
Mhm,
It was great working for the government, because we weren't profit driven. We were more research driven. And
mhm,
so,
mhm,
and then we used to get different guest speakers, different scientists and authors, and just really great thinkers, who would give talks, to everyone that was at the Moffett Field Air Base in Moffett Field near Mountain View. And there's the inventor of Mathematica once
mhm,
came
mhm,
to
mhm,
speak with us, that computer program.
mhm.
And
Yeah, that was my first introduction to coding, and man, that'll blow you away. Yeah.
yeah, so he was a really smart guy. And what's interesting is that at NASA there were different theories of origins. So there were different
Mm,
people believed in different origin theories. So not everyone believed in evolution.
mm,
There were some people that were Christian. They would believe in creation science. And then the Mathematica guy, he was very really interesting, because he didn't believe in either of those. He believed that there was a mathematical formula
Mm.
that created the world, and he was trying to figure out what the formula was. I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Right? I
Talking
don't
about a
know.
life mission there.
Yeah, yeah. I guess when you make enough money, you can do these esoteric things with
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah, definitely. So, how does this kind of, the next question is how does being able to kind of label yourself as a former NASA scientist that kind of has kind of a wow factor to it? How
Yeah,
does that impact the speed with which people will believe you to be credible or competent in some way or capable?
it's great. I think it really lays the foundation of, oh, you're not just some woo woo
Mm,
person. You know, it's also because I'm a very religious person. So
mm,
that's like two strikes against me for the irrational person. Like, you're religious, and then you believe in like all these holistic, kind of ancient remedies, sunshine and herbs and things like that. Which, I mean,
mm,
they're not. It's not like they're devoid from science. The I'm not into like crystals or it's not like I don't believe in like energy healing or things like this, but
mm,
I would rather lean on like I don't like to discredit anything that I don't know enough about. And I
mm,
don't like to
mm,
warn like, oh, that's just like, phony woo stuff. I like to investigate a matter thoroughly
mm,
before I discredit it. So if someone says, "Oh, do you do this?" I'm like, "Well, no, I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to speak positively or negatively either way." Hmm.
mm. Yeah,
Um,
it's sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
Like I say for those two groups you mentioned, like the woo woo side of being holistic, and then also the religious aspect. It seems like that there's a very small population of both of those groups that are very loud and kind of like almost paint the general narrative that most people kind of believe about both those groups. But then there are plenty of people who
Yeah,
that within those groups that don't necessarily subscribe to those kind of loud people who are
yeah,
self-described to that group as well. So that kind of makes it
yes.
difficult to navigate the general populace sometimes because of those reasons.
Yeah, because if you tell someone you're religious, they're like, "Oh no." If you tell someone you're holistic, they're like, "Oh no."
Hmm,
It's
hmm.
like you can only have so many strikes against you before you're not even allowed into someone's presence. Like they won't even give you a chance, to get to know you.
Yeah. So that NASA scientist label really helps you out to an extent for that.
Yeah, it does.
Even if, yeah. So I guess the next question kind of leads into that. Do you believe that there are stigmas around terms like holistic healing or holistic life coaching? And if so, what do you say to address some of those stigmas? You touched on this a little bit of being able to approach it rigorously, but if you could expand a little bit on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stigma and with the word holistic, and you're either holistic or you think it's weird. Like you're either on that side or you think you're like you're crazy. And
Mhm,
from what I see, people who are holistic, they either grew up holistic, with their parents and such, or they had a really bad experience with the modern medical system. Like me,
mhm,
that was
mhm,
kind of my journey, and then they kind of switched. Not like right away necessarily. There's a process of me becoming fully holistic and kind of believing that most of the things that they put in our food and water and medicine and chemicals that we use on a day-to-day basis are
mhm, mhm,
actually harmful. There's a process. It didn't happen overnight, of course. It was many years of study. um yeah, there's definitely a process. And the way I kind of combat that is that I think what wins people is number one, your own experience. If I tell them I did this, I know that won't work with people who are scientifically trained because they're trained to kind of discredit that. They say, oh, that's anecdotal. But for the average person, anecdotal is probably the most powerful thing, that I would say. The second thing that I try to do is I try to always quote. It's for me, it's hard to memorize actual studies and facts and
mhm,
stats, right? So
mhm,
what I try to do, what comes very easily to me is to memorize principles and stories and people. And so what I do is usually when I talk or I say I coach someone or something, I'll what I just told you a story about Dr. Weston A. Price and his research, and you can Google him and you can read his book. And so everything that I say is very researchable and
Mhm.
verifiable.
I guess maybe for areas of holistic healing that you're wanting to explore more, or you gave the example of some things you don't necessarily know about, and so you need to look into them a little more. How does your background in the computer science and like the logic driven, how does that influence your approach to holistic living?
Well, it has to make sense to me.
Mm.
And for example, homeopathy does not make sense to me yet.
Can you give a
Um,
brief explanation on what that is?
I can, but I would be telling you as a non-professional, a
Okay.
non-practitioner.
Okay.
So I might butcher it. So I see a homeopath sometimes. Um, my logical mind does not believe in it, but my experiential mind believes in it because
Mm,
it's worked for me at times. So homeopathy is based on the principle of like cures like.
mm,
And so I think it was Hahnemann, that was his name. He believed that if you took a substance that produced the same symptoms as what you are experiencing, that it will heal you. But it wasn't like a chemical effect, but it was on a, I suppose, a vibrational level, a vibrational
mm,
effect. And
mm.
it's going to sound woo woo when I describe it. I described it to someone once and they're like, the more you talk, the more I get a headache as you're describing this. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I know it sounds crazy. Anyway, so this is how you make a homeopathic remedy. Okay. You take something that produces a symptom of what you're trying to cure and you put it in water. Okay. And then you shake it vigorously and then you dilute it and then you shake it vigorously. And this is over a process of time. This isn't like necessarily just one day. You keep diluting,
Sorry,
you
do you have
keep,
an example of that? I'm thinking of like aspirin. You said non-chemical, but is there, what can we reference this against?
I mean, they use arsenic in some homeopathic remedies.
Okay. Okay. So stuff that you might not necessarily want to be dealing with in like the
Not
modern
everything. No,
sense.
sometimes they'll use herbs that you
Mm.
would take on a normal basis. But
Okay. So it is
sometimes,
like some physical thing that just goes in there. That's,
yeah, it is
yep.
something that
Yep.
produces an effect.
Mm.
As a chemist, you would say, yeah, this produces that effect. You'd say yes. But they dilute it and they shake it and dilute it to the point where, if you were to test it under a microscope, there's pretty much no trace of that original substance left anymore. But what they say is that the water, however, carries the memory of that substance on some kind of vibrational level,
Mm.
and that it helps and it cures. So for me, I'm like, oh, maybe it's just placebo, right? Maybe it's just placebo.
Mm.
But I don't know. I've taken some homeopathic remedies, and you know that there's probably the best anti-itch remedy is homeopathic. I don't remember the name of it, but the most popular one is actually a homeopathic remedy.
Huh.
So I don't like to discredit it, and I don't go to homeopathy by default, but sometimes when the cure eludes me, I will visit my homeopath and I'll just be like, hey, what do you think? And even if it is a placebo effect, it works and it's safe. So why not?
Hmm. Yeah,
That's
that's
my
great.
opinion.
So how do you remedy the fact that, so you said that something needs to make sense to you in order for you to kind of, I'm
For
gonna
me to promote it.
broadly
And
use the word, yeah, I'm broadly use the word like
yeah,
prescribe. So like as in something
yeah.
that you put out there for other people. And then you just mentioned how your personal experience, that seems to work for you. So how do you reconcile you wouldn't prescribe it because you don't logically understand it, but you can still emotionally resonate with it. And so you would do it yourself. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so I'm very experimental and
Mm,
I will experiment with things that I don't understand yet
mm,
if I have a credible source that I trust that recommends it. But when I coach and teach people, I don't prescribe because I'm not a medical doctor, but I just,
mm, mm,
I don't recommend for them to eat anything or take anything, but I'll recommend for them to study something or to read a book or watch a video or read an article or things like that. Those are my prescriptions. My prescription is knowledge. And so if I know, if I've studied on a certain thing like vitamin C, like I just said, also, for example, the carnivore diet has been very effective for me and others. Iodine, I'm into iodine therapy. Certain herbs, um, which yeah, then I will totally advocate for it. But if something is not so well researched, but you know, there's nothing else that I know of that I can recommend, then I will say, this some people say this works, some people say that works.
Interesting. So moving away a little bit from the sort of the some of the physical um, moments of this, when moving into experience a little bit, when you reflect on some of your life's most challenging moments, were there specific beliefs or internal narratives that either helped or hindered your capacity to grow, something like burnout or imposter syndrome or something of that nature?
I think everything that has greatly hindered me is has been the catalyst to help me grow
Mm,
greatly. And so one of them is, of course, what I just mentioned with the migraines that were very
mm,
debilitating. And the second time in my life when I felt like, and I thought I was on my deathbed at that time. The second time that I thought I was on my deathbed was when I got hypothyroidism.
mm.
Um, uh, my husband actually diagnosed me, and I was like, yes, I think you're right. And so I just went ahead and proceeded to treat myself as if I had hypothyroidism, and I was able to recover. And that I felt like threatened my life because I couldn't regulate my body temperature. When I would get these hypothyroid attacks, just all of a sudden, now I understand what triggers me, but I didn't know at that time what triggered me. So it would come out of the blue, it seemed. And I would just start shivering. And it would, I'm in Texas, so it's like 100, gets to 105, 106, 108, 109 sometimes. And I think it was like a summer day, 105 degrees. And I got it, my first hypothyroid attack, and I started shivering like it looked like I was having a seizure.
Mm.
And I asked my husband to get me my winter down jacket, and I started sipping. He made me some hot tea, and I went outside to warm up in the 105-degree weather because I was so freezing cold. And it took me like an hour to get stable. And so that was very hard. And as a naturopathic herbalist, I was able to figure out, nutritionally and supplement wise and herbal wise, how to treat myself. But to really get to the root cause, I turned to a life coach.
Mm.
And the reason why I turned to life coaching is because in the past, because I had issues in my life, like stress induced. This was partly a stress induced problem. And talking to a conventional, let's say, psychiatrist or therapist or something like that, um, their default go to is to prescribe you medication. And I knew that I didn't want that and I didn't want to go that route. Um,
Was your stress
so,
more physical or emotional? You're talking a lot about these physical symptoms. Was there an emotional aspect of that as well?
well, as an entrepreneur, I would say I always lived kind of like a high stress life. But
Hmm.
the additional stress in my life at that time was um, so I have 7 children of my own. And then my husband's mother adopted 2 children, but she kind of became too old to care for them properly. So we had agreed to take care of them after she passed away, but we felt like we had to do it before. We had to do it now because they were just not getting the education that they needed. Very basic things. She was trying her best, of course, but she just couldn't physically. And so I homeschool my children. So I started homeschooling them too. And it was very stressful because they didn't know our ways, they were troubled, and it was just very hard to integrate them into our family. And I really didn't feel like I was getting any support from my husband or his mother. And I was Like I was ready to divorce my husband. I was ready to give up on the two adopted children. We didn't adopt them, but we're kind of like their guardians. And then that was one of the triggers for my hypothyroidism. So I
Mm,
knew I needed counseling of sorts, you know. So I turned to coaching because that was, you know, in the holistic movement, that's very popular, you know, coaching. And it was really great. We got marriage coaching instead of marriage counseling. And we had marriage counseling in the past. Marriage coaching was different, and I feel like it was better because, you know, therapy often focuses on your past and kind of healing your past, which is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but the coaching really helped us move towards a better future. It gave us tools to cope, and work together. It was like team building. It was like treating our marriage as if we were a sports team and we were a new sports team. And so, how can we effectively play the game of life together
mm.
successfully? And that was just, it was a great approach.
That's yeah. I've heard a similar phrase of like making sure that it's not you versus the other person, it's you guys against the problem. So what's a framework that people and couples in general can use to shift from that one versus one mindset into the you use this metaphor of a team versus the opposition.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things that they got me to understand, I don't want to speak too much for my husband because I can't speak for him, but
Mm,
just to assume that he's not against me, that he's not, anything he's doing, that he's not doing it because he wants to do something negative to me, and that he wants to help me because it's in his best interest to help me. And if he lacks in anything, in my opinion, that that there are better ways of communicating our needs. And but I think the foundation is, I felt like the foundation was, you know, me feeling like he didn't care and that he just wanted me to do everything by myself, which, you know, he also portrayed by his choice of words and his tone, you know. So they gave us both just better ways to speak to each other, different tones and different mindsets. I think that's the most important part of coaching, is they helped us to have different mindsets, mindsets that were more positive, more resilient, more supportive, things like that. And it was the same thing for, so we got marriage coaching, and we also got, I personally got life coaching for myself. And that's when I just dealt with my own personal struggles, um, thoughts that were, you know, very self-defeating. For example, I kept saying to my coach, you know, I have to take care of these children. I have to take care of these children. It's my responsibility. It's my duty. But then at the same time, I felt like this very heavy weight of that. And I didn't like it. I didn't like this feeling of, I have to do this. I have no choice. And then my coach got me to think, you know, you don't have to do anything. You know, you're a free human being. What if you just, you know, said that, what if you said you don't have to? And I said, well, but if I don't have to, you know, then, you know, what if maybe I'm a bad person, or
mm,
maybe they won't be the best that they can be. But, you know, just her helping me to understand that I didn't have to do this, that it was my choice, and that I was actually, because I was choosing to do it, um it just empowered me, and it made me feel like I was doing a good thing instead of doing something that I had to do.
mm.
And I don't know, it may seem trivial, but it was really powerful, that mindset shift for me.
Yeah, it sounds like a shifting kind of the ratio of the self-criticism talk and the self-compassion talk. So how do you, I guess you've kind of alluded to this, but what strategies do you use to be able to have more control over maybe a self-criticism that drives growth, maybe not necessarily criticism in that sense, but something that drives growth in you versus something that drives the acceptance of the now?
Probably both, right? Driving growth,
Mm,
I think, comes with acceptance of now, right? And I think I mean, the coaching really helped me. And I think that my religion, that's where my religion plays a part as well. Where as a Jew, I believe that as an Orthodox Jew, I'm not sure about all Judaism, but this is what I learned from, because there's different branches, that everything comes from God, everything comes from one source, and that everything is ultimately for my good. Even if it's bad temporarily, it will be good in the end if I react to it in a healthy way instead of in an unhealthy way. And just having that mindset and that faith that everything that comes to me will ultimately be for my good. That helps me to cope and think of strategies and just reframe things in a way that is positive. And so I could say the same thing about my health. All of my health crisis, my first one led me to become a naturopathic herbalist. My second one led me to become a holistic life coach, because I just felt like it was such an important part of my own personal healing. This is something that I need to incorporate into my practice as well. And I think it's
that's
also it's been a really great tool for raising my children as well, and helping them have a positive mindset.
sound like some really strong systems to have in place.
Yeah.
So I want to be cognizant of your time. So my last question is going to be, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you think would be helpful for the audience to hear?
Um, I
The answer
think
can be
that,
no too.
yeah, sure. Well, just because I heard a little bit about your background and like why you're doing this podcast and things like that. I really believe that, every moment is a gift, and that we're always changing as people. And so what you do now might not be what you do in the future, but every single part of your journey will ultimately play a role in, your ultimate self, which is going to be a combination of many different experiences. And kind of not be afraid to experience different things or try on different roles. And there's a very negative, um we tend to speak negatively about people who are jacks of all trades but master of none.
Hmm,
There's
hmm.
something very negative. But I think, to neglect many other things can lead to a very boring life sometimes,
Hmm.
and also an unfulfilling life. And so not to be afraid really to follow your heart, as cheesy as that sounds, but
Hmm.
still also taking hold of the things that have served you well in the past as well.
Hmm. That seems like a great place to end. Yeah, thank you for that last insight and for answering all those other questions. And yeah, so thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. Have a great week.
You too.